Hey everyone, today is day 25, and I'm going to be doing the Bible reading, obviously. And today I'm going to be reading to you from Galatians 5, because I was reading a lot of the letters to the churches, and Galatians 5 was a really good one. 5:13. You, my brothers and sisters, were called to be free, but do not use your freedom to indulge the flesh. Rather, serve one another humbly in love. For the entire law is filled in keeping this one command: love your neighbor as yourself. One of the Ten Commandments. If you bite and devour each other, watch out, or you will be destroyed by each other. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. I think this passage does a very good job of explaining the difference between freedom and also don't do whatever you want. Because I know that a lot of people either think you are free to do whatever you want, or they're incredibly legalistic about it and they're like, no, this is good, you need to be following all these rules. And I think does a really good job of explaining what I think, which is that you're free to do whatever you want, but led by the Spirit. I'll read the next part. So I say, walk by the Spirit, and you will not gratify the desires of the flesh. For the flesh desires what is contrary to the Spirit, and the Spirit what is contrary to the flesh. So you're free to do whatever you want as a Christian if you're walking with the Spirit. Because if you're walking with the Spirit, you won't want what your flesh wants. And what your flesh wants is sinful. Like it says in verse 19, actually, the acts of the flesh are obvious: sexual immorality, impurity, and debauchery, idolatry, witchcraft, hatred, discord, jealousy, rage, ambition, random stuff like that, bad stuff. That's all stuff that's part of your flesh wants and desires that don't actually align with anything actually wholesome or of God. And if you're actually living in the Spirit and reading your Bible, living life as a servant for other people and living a life that is pure, then you won't, not to say that you won't be tempted, but you won't have the desire to live in sin the same way. The more that you get used to listening to your Spirit and getting guided by the Spirit inside of you, the easier it is to not want to sin, because you can see what's wrong with it, I guess. And I think there is a lot of debate about what actually is wrong, but I think that this isn't so much about that as thinking if you're led by the Spirit, you won't be led to do anything that you think is wrong. You still have to be proactive to make sure you're learning and growing and knowing right and wrong and why that is. Because the Bible's not just a book full of just random things oh yeah, you shouldn't eat pork because God says so. In the story, it's no, pork had if you ate pork that wasn't prepared properly and the pigs that you got it from were sick, pork was not good for you. It had tons of parasites and tons of bacteria. God banned them from doing it because it was bad, and they didn't understand. They just thought it was some random thing and they followed it because they trusted God, but they didn't know that pork had antibodies in it. They didn't even know what germs were back then. And all of the old practices in the Old Testament about washing your hands and all this stuff, back in the day, they didn't understand what germs were. If they thought if your hands didn't have physical dirt on them, then they wouldn't be dirty. Because what else is dirt, really? They didn't understand germs or microbes and all that kind of stuff. And yet, reading through all the ritualistic stuff they were instructed to do, that seemed like it was just completely out of service to them. It was all stuff that's very practical for keeping stuff clean and sanitary and free from parasites and all this kind of stuff that they didn't even understand. And that's why in the New Covenant, now that we actually have the ability to understand all this in the modern day, we're no longer under the requirements of that law, because we have the ability to see and understand processes of being clean. And the Old Testament's still there to give really good instruction on how to do that if that's what you want to follow. But now that we have the ability to understand that, God's okay, you can decide this for yourself, God knows what's best. And there's some stuff in the Bible that you might be I don't understand what that law is there for, or why that's considered bad even. You have to understand that if you trust God to know everything, you gotta trust that he has reasons for his laws. I know that personally I've always been a very scientifically minded person. I always try to figure out the answer to every problem. And the Bible over and over and over again shows me that it only has rules in it that are going to help you. There's nothing in this arbitrary or controlling. If you actually follow the Bible and understand what it says, it's great. It's amazing. And so after it lists off a whole reason of all the things that are bad about the flesh, it then goes on to talk about the fruit of the Spirit. And the fruit of the Spirit, everyone knows these. The fruit of the Spirit is love, joy, peace, forbearance. Some versions call it patience. This one calls it forbearance, which makes sense. Kindness, goodness, faithfulness, gentleness, self-control. Against such things there is no law. I actually really like that last part. I don't think it gets included very much. Against such things is no law. Yeah, no one's going to get mad at you for being patient or kind or good. Because God's never going to hate you no matter what you do. God's not going to hate you. But it says here very clearly, I think verse 15, yeah, if you bite and devour each other, watch out or you will be destroyed by each other. If everyone around you is stealing, that's just going to cause conflict and distrust and stuff like that, because you can't rely on people to be reliable. And I think that one thing that I'm still trying to work on understanding is what the meaning behind flesh and spirit is. I don't really understand, like, if it's supposed to be like an out of body thing, if it's supposed to just be like two different parts of your conscience, if it's like yin yang kind of even. But I think it makes it pretty clear by saying like the fruit of the spirit, which are like things that the spirit will produce in you, is kind of like what you should be striving for. So like by living by the spirit, regardless of what the spirit really is just to be seeking after things that are, you know, loving, joyful, peaceful, kind, good, faithful, gentleness, self-control. All those are things that are of the spirit. So if you try to seek after things that are like that, then that's going to help you grow in the spirit, from what I can tell at least. That's my weekly bit of wisdom on that. If your parents or you even have one of those tacky things that have like the fruit of the spirit up and there's like all the different letters and like half cursive, like love, joy, peace, I always kind of just ignored it. But like, hey, next time I see it, read it. Think like, hey, that's stuff that I should be trying to like work towards and internalize that. Think like, this is my mission, to become more like that. Become more loving, become more peaceful, become more joyful. Those are all fruits of the spirit. If you kind of shift your focus in your mind from like, oh, that's the song I learned in kindergarten, the fruit of the spirit is love, joy, peace, you know, that song. If you kind of shift your focus in your mind to like, these are actual good things to be trying to focus on and growing, because that is what the spirit's fruit is. If you are living in the spirit, that's what you're going to be doing, and by extrapolation, if you do those things, you'll become more in the spirit. So yeah, thank you guys for watching. Hope you found this like enriching. I try to do something a little bit less negative. I feel like a lot of my past Bible things have been like kind of sad and depressing near the end, and this one's supposed to just be like kind of some good advice that I got from reading. I didn't actually intend for it to be about fruits of the spirit. I was just reading through Galatians 5, and I actually like chose like, oh yeah, I want to do this chapter before I actually realized the fruit of the spirit was in that, which is kind of funny. But yeah, I hope you guys found use in this message, and yeah, catch you guys next week for another Bible study. And tomorrow's gonna be Dune part 3, I think, and then the rest of the week will be the rest of the whole workout stuff. I'm gonna try to get back on the course of that, because I don't really think that Dune is the most interesting thing ever to commentate, but I already kind of started, so it's a little too late now. Thank you guys for watching. Catch you guys tomorrow.